if you did watch. It was about Thor 1 and 2, and I had to pre-record it because I was out in Palm Springs. And because I was out in Palm Springs, I didn't watch anything new or anything that I haven't already reviewed previously on my old show, Cine Show. So I'm afraid we're gonna have a bit of a repeat today. But I don't think I'm gonna do just one movie today. I think I'm gonna kind of do The Shining and then do a bit of Silence of the Lambs. But specifically, we watched Silence of the Lambs on, I believe, FX, which is like cable or whatever, network TV, whatever it is. And if you don't know, they censor a lot of things. So I want to talk about how censorship is when you watch a rated R movie. But we'll get into that, and I'm actually kind of excited to talk about that because it was a pretty funny experience. Oh yeah, okay, so we're gonna be doing The Shining. I've done The Shining, like I said. It was actually, I think, my second ever review, if I'm not wrong. And I did that on my old show, Cine Show. And you can find all the episodes of my old show and all the episodes of this show. If you just search up like Rollercoaster in the Clouds, KUCI, I'll come up. Or if you search up Cine Show, KUCI, I'll come up. That's CINESHOW, KUCI. Yeah, you can find me, and I post everything. So, The Shining is a film I have, I would say, a memorable history with. I watched it for the first time, probably almost 6 years ago, but, it's as if it was yesterday, really. Um, it was a really special experience, and when I first watched it, I thought it was a great movie, but I was always a bit confused because a friend of mine said that it was his favorite movie, and it was always a little bit perplexing to me how this could be your favorite movie when, we had already seen like things like Silence of the Lambs. However, over time, I grew to understand why this movie could be considered better than Silence of the Lambs, and indeed is completely reasonable for it to be your favorite movie. To be clear, on my top 10 list, these movies are right next to each other, so I don't think it's a lot better than Silence of the Lambs, but I don't think that The Shining is any worse than the movie, and I've grown to appreciate it so much more on rewatch every single time. I think the film is brilliantly shot, which is, no surprise with Kubrick. I think it's a little different than like Barry Lyndon or, you know, I think Barry Lyndon and Clockwork Orange are like a more colorful production. I think this one's a more like a little bit eerier and at, I don't want to say bleak because I don't think it's bleak in the sense of being gray, but I think it's slightly more less colorful and less like um how should I say it? Less colorful and less, I guess, outrageous than like Clockwork Orange or Barry Lyndon, like because those movies are very um, over the top in terms of their direction in a good way. This one is a little more restrained and but absolutely beautiful, and he really used the direction to tell the story and express what the movie is about, which is, in my opinion, twofold. It's about a place and people that slip in and out of like supernatural and reality, and there's also two stories going on. There's like the supernatural creeping into the natural in these characters' lives, and a man basically becoming like a ghost, not a ghost, but like a haunting spirit. And then there's also like the more natural story that's going on where it's like about abusive husband that's like losing his mind and just blames everything on his wife basically and starts to want to hurt them basically. So I think those are the two main stories. Let's talk about the cast before I do the synopsis on IMDb like I always do. Um, so, to my knowledge, this is pretty different than the book. Uh, I think famously Stephen King didn't like this movie because it was very different than the book. Um, Not that I care at all, um, because it's a great film. It stars Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, who I think are amazing in this role. Although when this film came out, it was considered a terrible performance, but I think it's typical like foolhardiness of their time because the movies were so great. I think sometimes they just saw something unique and were like, "Oh, this is weird." But I think their performances are really good, and Jack Nicholson in particular plays perfectly like the guy that is sort of just weird from the beginning. Like there's something strange about him. Whether it's the fact that he kind of seems like tired all the time or just like out of it, or just the way he smiles is very unsettling. And Shelley Duvall, she kind of plays like the lamb. Like she's like a very innocent character, and she's very nice. And Jack Torrance doesn't really have much of a reason to be hating her. So when she gets, the hatred directed at her, you really feel for her. The child actor Danny Lloyd is a great addition. Oh, I gotta say something. I found an amazing website. It's for like film outfits, like not film outfits, like film shirts. And I found an amazing Kubrick category they have, and I bought so many things. I bought the Apollo 11 uh, sweatshirt or sweater that Danny wore. I got I think I got a regular Shining poster on a shirt, and I got a bunch of other stuff. I got like Kill Bill. I got the outfit that the bride wears to Okinawa when she walks into Hattori Hanzo's sushi restaurant. Um, I got some amazing things. I'm so excited for them to arrive. And I also bought this sick blanket that has like every Tarantino movie on it. I'm absolutely excited for it. Maybe I'll talk about it when it arrives because I bought so many things that I forgot every one. Then you got Scatman Crothers who plays Halloran. He was good as well. Philip Stone that plays Grady, awesome. Uh, Joe Turkel that plays Lloyd, fantastic. He played in Blade Runner, which is a movie I really want to rewatch. He played what was the guy's name? Um, oh yeah, Dr. Tyrell. That was great. And yeah, that's mainly the cast we should go over, but everyone is great. Everyone is on the money. So let's see. I'm trying to find the synopsis. Okay, here you are. So, former teacher and recovering alcoholic Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, interviews for a caretaker job at the Overlook Hotel in an effort to rebuild his life after a volatile temper lost him his teaching position. Is that how he lost it, huh? I didn't catch on to that. I thought they were just looking for a new job. I gotta look into that more. See, even when you watch a movie like 7 times, you miss little details. I should first say the film opens on an amazing soundtrack as they fly over this sort of river, and we get to see the Overlook Hotel perched at the top of the mountain. Perfect opening to a horror film. The hotel manager, Mr. Stuart Ullman, played by Barry Nelson, warns Jack that he and his family will be snowbound for most of the winter and the potential risk of cabin fever. Uh, and there's a risk of cabin fever. He drives the point home by recounting a season when the caretaker, Charles Grady, went crazy and brutally killed his wife and 2 girls, and finally himself. Given his own desperation and the opportunity to pursue his true passion, which is writing, Jack acknowledges the warning but accepts the job. Then we get to see back home in Colorado, down near not on a mountain. Jack's son Danny, played by Danny Lloyd, has a seizure while talking to his imaginary friend Tony about the Overlook Hotel. He has a vision of blood splashing out of an elevator, pouring out of an elevator in the hotel, an image which is revisited several times throughout the film. There's a great, basically storytelling technique where there's lots of foreshadowing that's not fully explained through Danny's visions that recur throughout the film, and it really creates a feeling of anticipation. And yeah, just like an eerie feeling that something bad's about to happen, and you don't know why or how until the end. Basically, his mom gets a doctor for him, but he's fine, and then they have a beautiful scene where they drive up the mountain to the hotel. Then Danny meets Scatman Crothers' character of Dick Halloran, and Halloran recognizes that Danny is telepathic, and he refers to this power as shining. And he explains to him that, while people may shine, like him and Danny, places also shine, and it usually means that something terrible has happened at a place, and it leaves a trace. And the way that Halloran explains it to Danny is like when you burn toast, it leaves a smell. And much like that, something at this hotel has happened, and it has left a trace of itself. But only people who shine can perceive it. So this is the first indication that, or not the first indication, but it's the first confirmation that there's a supernatural power to Danny, and that this man, the head chef, Dick Halloran, also has this power. I apologize for yawning. And then, pretty right away, Jack's mental health seems to be going down. He can't sleep. He has writer's block. He's very irritable. He snaps at his wife. He does not seem good. There's this scene where he really goes crazy at her because I think she basically comes in and says, hi to him while he's writing in the Great Hall. And, says, you want to go on a walk later? And he's like, you break my concentration. And he tells her, I can't swear on this show, but he says, get the heck out of here, let's say. Also, Danny starts to have visions of the 2 girls, very iconic, the 2 girls in the dresses that say, come and play with us, Danny. And he basically tells no one about this, and he also is wondering about this room he has visions of called Room 237. He doesn't know what's behind it, but he's thinking about it. While the weather is still relatively warm, Jack's wife Wendy and Danny walk through a maze of tall hedges, making a game out of it, stopping at dead ends and fixing their mistakes. Um, Jack looks through a maze model sculpture inside, um, basically the hotel, and he's basically looking at the maze right as they're walking through it. So it's very eerie, as if he can see them in the maze. So you get these little hints that something not natural is going on here, and there's something about Jack that doesn't quite add up. One day, a ball rolls towards Danny as he plays with his toys. It appears to come from the open door of room 237. Huh. I'm sorry, I yawned again. The problem with doing these early shows, I sleep late, gotta wake up early. But anyway, it cuts when Danny goes into the room, and it cuts to Wendy, who's down in like the basement in the boiler room trying to turn on the boiler, and all of a sudden she hears her husband screaming, and she like rushes up to go see him, and he's like basically like in the midst of a dream, and he's drooling all over himself, and he wakes up and he's screaming, and this is when things kind of get a bit weird. Not weird, it kind of gets real. Jack tells Wendy that he had a dream of him. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this. I think I'm allowed to say it because I think you're allowed to talk about violence as long as it's informative. Because there was a serial killer show on this radio station at some time, so I can say this. He basically tells her that he had a dream of like cutting her and Danny into pieces. So, as you can imagine, it's not the type of thing you want to tell your wife. And she's like, oh God, okay. Everything's going to be okay. She's very nice. But then all of a sudden, Danny appears at the other end of the Great Hall. He looks disoriented and he's sucking his thumb. But his sweater is all ripped and there are bruises around his neck. And he's basically not talking. And then Wendy's like, you did this to him, didn't you? And then she basically like takes him and runs to the room. Jack is furious about the accusation. He storms around the hotel, making his way to the gold ballroom. He sinks his head basically into his arms, sitting at the bar, which is of course empty because the hotel is empty. There's no one there but them. There's no alcohol. It's all been removed from sight. All of a sudden, he looks up and he says, "Hello, Lloyd." And then there's a bartender just standing there who serves him a drink. And there's no alcohol at the hotel. So you're like, is this a hallucination? Or what's going on? Jack is nonplussed, which is a very complicated word that I will define because I forget what it means. Surprised and confused. I don't think he's surprised and confused at all. He felt very natural to me. But okay, that's this guy's opinion. He basically addresses him by his name Lloyd as if he's been there before. In the course of telling his troubles, to Lloyd, Jack reveals that he unintentionally dislocated Danny's shoulder back, a couple years ago, and that Wendy has never let it go and she'll never forgive him. This is basically like Jack is starting to be very unreasonable with his wife. He's basically trying to blame her for everything, and he's kind of not taking responsibility. But it's also like building up the fact that Jack does have he does have a history of violence when he gets drunk, and all of a sudden he's drinking at this bar. You You don't know how it's happening because there's no alcohol, but he's sitting down and drinking. Um, Notably, Jack states that the injury happened 3 years ago. While explaining the same story to the pediatrician, Wendy said that Jack, who vowed to quit drinking immediately following the accident, has only been sober for 5 months. Another thing I didn't catch up on. See, this is why you rewatch movies. I didn't realize that. So Jack tells the bartender it happened 3 years ago. And yet, Wendy says he vowed to quit drinking, yet has only been sober for 5 months. So, Jack has, like, either been lying about drinking or he's lying to the bartender or, something's happening there. Or, I guess, time is not clear to him. I didn't notice that. And then all of a sudden, a frantic Wendy comes in and finds Jack seemingly alone at the bar. She pleads with him to investigate Danny's claim that a crazy woman attacked him in the bathtub of 237. And Jack is very begrudging but agrees to have a look. So as you can see, the hotel seems to be getting more and more supernatural. There's a woman in a bathtub. There's a guy bartending that's sort of dressed like he's in the 1920s. It's all so strange. Jack approaches room 237, and as this is happening, Danny appears to be having a seizure in his own room. Then we cut to Dick Halloran back in his home in Florida, staring wide-eyed as he picks up on a signal that Danny's sending. So basically, Danny's in trouble, and he's trying to communicate with Dick Halloran to come save them. Wow, this synopsis is long. Jack cautiously enters room 237. The bedroom is empty and he proceeds to the bathroom. He watched lustfully as a young, beautiful woman, who is not clothed. I once again don't know how much of this I'm allowed to talk about, but basically they kiss each other and all of a sudden he looks in the mirror and the woman is not a young, beautiful woman. She's a rotting corpse. So once again, the film is getting progressively more surreal. The hotel is changing, and it's sort of becoming clear that these are not hallucinations. Like, something's happening here because both Jack and his son are experiencing these visions. Not visions, they're real. And then she starts laughing madly and chases him out of the room. When he reports to Wendy, Jack denies anything happened in room 237. So now Jack is starting to become kind of the outright villain because he's lying for no reason. He's lying for a reason. He wants to keep them at the hotel. But he's lying for a bad reason. And she basically says she wants to take their son to a doctor, and he becomes like really angry, and he's like, "You're ruining my life. I'm not gonna let you screw my life over." And he's just like blaming her for everything and saying that everything's going great at the hotel. He can do his writing in peace here. He storms out and returns to the Gold Room, which is now the scene of an extravagant party with guests dressed in 1920s fashion. And I absolutely love this scene. I think it's just beautiful. And then all of a sudden, a waiter spills avocado on his jacket, which I think is like an alcoholic drink. Let's see what it is. Avocado is a Dutch liqueur made from egg yolks. It looks good, but I'm not into alcohol, but that looks great. Alcohol always looks good, in my opinion, but I don't like the taste. But it has a nice look. Yeah, so the guy spilled on his jacket, and the butler's like, "Come to the bathroom, I will wash it off for you." And they talk, and it's clear that this man is Delbert Grady, the guy that Mr. Ullman told Jack about that murdered his family. But that was only like, recently. So why is this guy dressed in 1920s fashion and says he's like, you know, the waiter here? And that Jack is like, you are the caretaker that killed your wife and kids. And um, there's a chilling scene where Grady drops the act and says, you've always been the caretaker. And then he says that, are you aware your son is attempting to contact an outside party into this situation? And he says that his son has a great talent. I don't think you're aware how great it is. And Grady advises Jack on how to correct Danny and how to deal with Wendy if she interferes. And he basically says that he corrected his wife and children when they tried to escape the hotel. So, Jack is obviously like pretty gone at this point. He is talking about possibly murdering his family because they want to leave the hotel. So he's going insane. He's talking spirits that supposedly are from not that long ago, but apparently are like 50 years in the past. At the Overlook, oh no, never mind. Back in Florida, Dick Halloran attempts to contact the hotel, but since there's a storm, the lines are down, and Jack actually has removed the radio transmissions too, and he's disabled the snowcat so they can't leave. So he's worried about Danny, so he books the next flight back to Colorado to go to the hotel and save them. At this point, Wendy's going crazy, and she's basically armed herself with a baseball bat and is looking for Jack. She goes to the Great Hall, where, Jack usually is. He's writing, and there's an amazing and iconic scene where she starts flipping through his work, and there's hundreds of pages of the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. All work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. And at this point, she realizes her husband is insane. And it implies he's been crazy from the beginning because, he's been writing this the whole time, and he's only wrote one thing over and over again for like, a couple hundred pages. And then Jack approaches her from behind in a sort of like a jump scare, but a good jump scare, not one of those stupid ones that are over the top. Wendy shrieks with alarm and wheels around to face him. I do a good impression of this whole scene, but yeah, they're going up the staircase. She's trying to keep him at arm's length with the baseball bat, and Jack says, Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt ya. I can't say the rest because it has a swear word, but I enjoy doing impressions of Jack Torrance in this film. I think he's great. And she gets a good hit on him on the head, and he tumbles down the stairs. Wendy drags Jack's limp body to the pantry and locks him inside just as he regains conscious. Jack tells her that he sabotaged the radio as well as the snowcat, leaving them there. So Jack is locked in the pantry, cannot leave. She goes to the snowcat and confirms what he told her, so they're trapped. A few hours later, Jack is roused from the nap by the sound of Delbert Grady's voice. Grady expresses disappointment and a lack of confidence in Jack, but Jack assures him that he can get the job done, killing his family, if he only has one more chance. Then the pantry door suddenly unlocks, and this is a confirmation that the supernatural elements are not just hallucinations, they are real, because Grady has directly changed the physical world. He has unlocked the door. And of course, Danny got bruised by the woman. However, it happened off screen, so you weren't 100% sure that it was the woman who did it, but now there's a confirmation that this door opened due to Grady, who is a spirit, essentially. Wendy has fallen asleep in the room. Danny is in a trance, carrying a knife and muttering, "Red rum, red rum." He takes Wendy's lipstick and writes, "Red rum," on the bathroom door. He begins shouting, "Red rum, red rum," which wakes up Wendy. She clutches him to her and sees the reflection of the bathroom door. Murder. Reversed, red rum reads murder. And then this is like the big climax of the film. Jack's right when she sees murder, Jack hits the door with an axe. And it's sort of, this is when it becomes, when all the build up turns to violence, and he's knocking down the door, but Wendy and her son barricade themselves in the bathroom. She opens the window of the bathroom and slides her son down this snow hill that has formed on the side of the house, and she's trying to escape, but she can't fit through the window. She basically tells Danny to run and hide. Meanwhile, Jack has chopped his way through the front door and calls out, oh, this is one of my favorite lines. He's like, "Wendy, I'm home." I enjoy that. Jack Torrance is just amazing. I love the character. He's so good. Jack politely knocks on the bathroom door. Wendy holds her knife and is ready to defend herself as Jack begins chopping the door. And he says, little pigs, let me come in, not by the hair of your chinny chin chin." And he huffed and he puffed and he blew your house in. And he starts hitting the door. He gets a nice hole in the door and he says, "Here's Johnny," referencing Johnny Carson. He goes to unlock the door through the hole, but Wendy slashes at his hand with the knife. And all of a sudden, Jack hears a low rumble of an approaching snowcat, which seems to be impossible because he disabled the snowcat. But the snowcat driver is Dick Halloran, who has got another snowcat and has traveled up to the hotel. Dick Halloran is inside the hotel and he calls out repeatedly, walking slowly through the reception lobby. And then Jack is hiding behind a pillar and swings the axe into Dick's chest, killing him. Danny, hiding in a kitchen cabinet, screams, revealing his location. He clambers out of the steel cabinet and runs outside. Meanwhile, Wendy has ventured from the bathroom and begun to search. But the hotel is rapidly changing. She's seeing old ghosts of the hotel, old guests, and essentially now even Wendy is experiencing the hotel's supernatural past. So now it's totally going crazy. You see the things like the blood in the elevator come out, and all of Danny's visions are coming true. Danny runs in the maze and he realizes he's leaving footprints, but he basically finds a way to cover his footprints and hide by crawling, and then he runs out of the maze, reuniting with his mother. They basically escape in the snowcat, and Jack freezes to death in the maze. However, it wouldn't be a Kubrick ending without, a powerful ending that leaves a little up to interpretation. Almost all of his films, virtually every single film, at least his greatest films, have these, little interpretive endings. They're not always super interpretive, but think of it, Barry Lyndon, where she writes the check and she has sort of tears in her eyes. It sort of leaves it up to your imagination what the future, or not what the future is, but does she still love him? There's that. What what becomes of her and the end of her life. Does she still love him? Then there's Clockwork Orange, which is like maybe the greatest ending ever he did, and one of the greatest endings of all time. The iconic "I was cured all right," which leaves it up to interpretation. Was he really cured, or is he being sarcastic? It has a little bit of a, almost like a demonic double meaning if he's really just being sarcastic. And then there's this film where you're alone in the hotel once again, over a beautiful song from like the 1920s, Midnight, the Stars and You, slowly zooming in on a group of photographs. The camera pans down to a party in the 1920s, zooming in. There is Jack's face in the center. Zooms down, Overlook Hotel, July 4th Ball, 1921. It's sort of the perfect cherry on top of the film that, loosely wraps together all the little clues, all the little trails, um, and basically confirms that, yes, Jack always was the caretaker. He is a spirit, and you can interpret what that means, and yeah, it's one of the finest endings of all time to one of the finest films of all time, a true masterpiece of horror, but also of film in general. Perfectly directed, great acting, great story. There's nothing more you need in a film or want. And like I said, over the years, over the rewatches, I finally understood why this was once my best friend's favorite film. Uh, and yes, I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. I watched it with my cousin Sophia in Palm Springs. She had never seen it before. She had actually gotten it spoiled by one of her friends, but she still enjoyed it. And yeah, it's a true special film that will always be in my top 10 and always have a special place in my heart. Okay. So that was my Shining review. Um because we have some extra time, I would like to and because I've already done this review once before on CineShow, I would like to talk about just some random stuff, but I guess we'll start out with Silence of the Lambs, watching it on cable, where if you don't know, if you watch a rated R film on cable, they essentially butcher the film, and it was a very interesting and frustrating experience, but also slightly funny because of how dumb it is. Every F word is literally dubbed, switched out with a different voice actor. Instead of saying the F word, they say freaking. Or there are just massive, iconic, and hugely poignant scenes. Like, think of the scene where Hannibal takes off the guy's face in the ambulance, or the scene where he's like basically like butchered the guy and he's hanging up above the prison, and the cops come in and it plays that little sound track as they see the cop hanging basically by his hands. They basically, what they do is they show it for like 1 second and they abruptly cut the scene. Certain scenes are cut out entirely, like the scene where Buffalo Bill does his little dance, which I don't want to talk about because it's a bit weird to talk about on the radio. But they just like cut massive scenes to make the film fit some mold that it's never meant to fit in. And it really kind of opened my eyes to how this is really, it's like a sacred art. And I guess it didn't open my eyes to the fact, and I guess it's not sacred. I don't want to be a bit blasphemous here, but it's a very um it's a poignant and respectful art form, film is, and it should not be bastardized to market a rated R film as a TV-14 option and cutting out parts of the film, butchering certain scenes, literally cutting out swear words and replacing it with some, you know, voice actor from God knows where. Um, it's all just, it's like you take a painting from Da Vinci or something and you start painting a smiley face over it because you don't like that she's frowning or something, or that frowning might turn people off. In my opinion, they only should show rated R films on like the channels that um, like HBO, where they show rated R films and they don't edit it. I think it's like network TV is what it's called. Channels you have to pay for. And I fully understand that cuts people out, but I'm okay with that. Because like I said, it's an art form. Why can't you just show like things that are PG-13 and below on the normal channels, normal cable? Like, although I will say, even showing a movie that's PG-13, you're not getting the full experience, because anybody that's watched movies on cable, like I do, will immediately notice that the aspect ratio and the quality of the film is always very diminished when you watch it on cable. They might not like censor things and cut scenes out, but the film quality is very much worse on cable than it is watching it on Apple TV or watching it on disc or something like that. Huh. Sorry, I yawned again. So yeah, and that kind of brings me to, on the radio, we have to obey FCC regulations. Although I would not go so far as to say what I do is art, but I do enjoy it, and I hope the people that watch enjoy it, but I have to censor myself as well. But there's also the legal censoring, and there's also censoring I have to do in other ways. Sometimes I feel that certain opinions I have may not be of interest, or uh, sometimes will not be appropriate for KUCI, so I have to censor it. And I guess that's okay. That's part of life. You have to censor yourself all the time, really, depending on who you talk to. But I think, like I said, the censoring of a rated R film, particularly a great film or a masterpiece film like Silence of the Lambs, is, it's kind of like, it's just it's like a circus. It's so stupid, and I can't imagine how awful they would do The Shining, because The Shining has so many swear words, so many there's like nudity in the film. um I'm sure it would be absolutely horrendous, the horrors they would inflict on this horror film. But I tend to watch a few films a few times on cable. Like, I've watched Indiana Jones a lot of times. Occasionally I watch Star Wars. Sometimes I watch Harry Potter when it comes on. Those films are definitely watchable on cable because they're PG-13. And it's mainly just the quality that goes down when you watch it on cable. Alright, we got like 10 more minutes, and I don't really know exactly what I should talk about. Um, what should I talk about? I was gonna talk about something else, but I'm kind of forgetting. Um, okay. My bad. Let's just go on IMDb and check what's up. We shall just search. Okay, let's talk about another horror film that is currently on top picks for IMDb. I think we talked about Silence of the Lambs, we talked about The Shining. They're both like horror-ish films, although I would argue Silence of the Lambs is more of a psychological thriller. Probably same with Shutter Island. Shutter Island is a good film. I've only seen it once. Um, the problem with Shutter Island is, unlike The Shining and unlike the subtlety of The Shining and the slow build up, and unlike the sort of thoughtful mystery and psychological thriller of Silence of the Lambs, the Shutter Island is kind of just an inferior product with mimicking, the hallmarks of those two films, in my opinion. It lacks the atmospheric horror of Shining, and it lacks the interesting story of something like, I don't know, Silence of the Lambs, or like a movie like Seven. It lacks the thrill, and it is a inferior directed film. It's a film that, in my opinion, was pretty predictable. Like, I figured it out. The Shining, I honestly didn't know where it would end up. There was certainly a lot foreshadowed at the near the beginning, but I didn't really know how it would end. And I think The Shining is more just, you can enjoy every scene on an atmospheric and experiential level, where I feel Shutter Island is so dependent on the ending, kind of like The Sixth Sense. And while both of those movies are good, and I think Sixth Sense is a lot better and probably a very good film, they are so dependent on their ending. And unlike a film like Usual Suspects, that it is very dependent on its ending, but I just feel like the actual experience of the film, whether it's the quality of the direction, the acting, or just sort of like how the film decides to pepper its little clues throughout, is just way more rewatchable than both of those films. Although I will admit, I do want to watch Sixth Sense again. I don't really know if I want to watch Shutter Island again. I did like it. I just feel like it was trying to be something it's not. Um, not no, I don't mean it like that. I mean Scorsese was trying to be something he's not. I just feel he thrives with mob movies, and to do like a psychological thriller that's sort of like a horror film doesn't really show him at his best. And also, um I was gonna say, there's only really one director that I know of that thrived and made masterpiece after masterpiece, different genres each time, making wildly different films, yet somehow so similar in terms of their style and sort of uh, threads, theme threads. And that was Stanley Kubrick. He made a horror film in The Shining. He made a period piece drama in Barry Lyndon. He made like a sort of sci-fi film. I don't really consider Clockwork Orange sci-fi. It's very hard to pin down what it is, but uh, let's see what they call Clockwork Orange. It was like a futuristic, um yeah, it's like a dystopian film, but I kind of don't consider it one. I don't It's very unique. I don't know exactly what it is, but we'll call it a dystopian sci-fi film. Then he made like a high sort of space sci-fi film that revolutionized the genre in um, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then he made like a surreal dream story in Eyes Wide Shut, and then I can't. Okay, the trailer on IMDb for Clockwork Orange is playing, and I'm like freaking falling in love with it already. I've been really wanting to rewatch it. I gotta take that off, or else I'll get distracted. And then he made a war film in Full Metal Jacket. And of the films I mentioned, it's the only one I don't actually consider a masterpiece. Although I've seen it once, I don't consider the film a masterpiece. I think it's a great film. However, unlike Kubrick's other masterpieces, his five masterpieces, Barry Lyndon, Clockwork Orange, 2001, Eyes Wide Shut, and The Shining, I think Full Metal Jacket fell short for me because I thought the first 30 minutes were incredible. They were so like Kubrick. Everything about it was him, and they were perfect, and it was like a masterpiece. But the rest of the film is just like a very good, well-made war film, and I think it fell short. But yeah, like I was saying, he made all those different genres. He made a sort of like comedy in Lolita. He made Spartacus, which was like an epic, you know, uh, an epic, what do you call it, historical epic. And then he made The Killing, which was a heist film. He really, the only thing you could nail down about Kubrick was his style and the quality was his, and the characters were had a lot in common, but the genre and the ability to do such radically different things in film was just nothing is like it anywhere. We got 4 more minutes, and next host is here, so yeah, I guess I'll just talk about where we've been on this episode. We basically started with The Shining, which I watched while I was on vacation in Palm Springs. And we talked about how essentially every time I watch this film, it grows in estimation, and I really understand what my friend was on about when he said it was the best movie ever. Um, like I said, it'll always have a place on my top 10. It's not my favorite movie, but it's in my top 10. I consider it a masterpiece. Um, then we talked a little bit about my experience with Silence of the Lambs, which I watched on cable, which was censored, to the moon and back, and it was just absolutely butchered. Then we talked about Shutter Island, which I consider like an inferior product, kind of inspired by The Shining and Silence of the Lambs. It's, in my opinion, it has a lot of commonality there. Then we just talked about Martin Scorsese not being able to make anything other than a mob film. I know that's not true. I know he can make other movies. I just think they fall short. Although Taxi Driver, of course, is not really a mob film, and that didn't fall short. But that was more in his prime. Then we talked about Kubrick being the guy that could master all the genres. And I don't really know of anyone else that did that, where they just do different thing after different thing. And I think maybe something that interests me most is like, why can't you really figure out what genre Clockwork Orange is? And doesn't that make it the best film ever? The fact that I can't figure out what it is in terms of genre, that you can't pin it down, because it's so complicated. Yes, on one part it's dystopian, on one part it's sci-fi-ish, on the other part it's kind of like a drama, on the other part it's kind of like a comedy, on the other end it's kind of like a psychological thriller. On the other hand, People are not going to believe this, but I think the film is profoundly religious. I think at the heart of Clockwork Orange is a discussion about what it means to be a good person. And the conclusion the film makes is through the priest character who says like you've deprived him of choice, and without free will, without the choice to choose good over evil, because Alex is deprived of that when he is basically induced PTSD to always basically never be able to choose bad. By doing that, you've basically removed his humanity, and you haven't created a good person, because a good person must choose good over evil. And most major religions, most of Christianity and Judaism, and maybe Islam, I'm not 100% sure what their point is on this, believe that like God gave us free will to choose good over evil, and like Satan uh, tempts you towards evil, and God tempts you towards good, and choosing good over the evil is how you become a good person. And that's what I feel Clockwork Orange really is, although there's no name for that genre. Anyway, it's been a really good show. You know, I did a lot of things. I usually do one or two, but like I said, I've already done a whole Shining review, and Clockwork Orange I've done, of course. But it was a good show. Thank you for watching.